David Trewin, who's the Manager of Business Partnerships at the Department of Environment and Conservation. Underline those two words. Lives in the Hills District. It's the first time he's missed the first day of the first test, the Ashes, and I've questioned his work-life balance ethic on account of that, but thank you for being here. He joined the department in 2001. It wasn't called that then, it was the EPA, I think, at that point, responsible for business partnerships that address a range of sustainability issues. So would you please welcome David Trewin.
That's right. Michael spoke this morning about people in the modern society feeling sad. I was feeling sad this morning. First day of the test series. So you thought our host was joking. Didn't know the score. I feel much better now because thanks to Ian's technology I know the score and Australia's doing well done, whoever it was, and I feel much better about that. We like quotes in this gig, don't we? Which is great because I love quotes too. It was Professor Ian Lowe who said, I don't know what he said recently, I saw it written recently, he said that the future is not somewhere that we are going, but somewhere we are creating. Not somewhere we are going, but somewhere we are creating. And I thought about Harry's presentation when he was talking about Quicksilver. You look at successful businesses and those that develop businesses that are sustainable, they don't just meander forward into some future and they let things look after themselves. They take responsibility, they create a future. And that's going to be one of the themes I'm going to pursue today. Because it's not only about business, it's about how we as individuals create a future, a sustainable future. It's about how us as government play a role in creating future and, of course, business. And if we combine all of those things into a partnership for sustainability, we've got real leadership and real power. I'm going to talk about sustainability and a bit about quality of life. And if I forget to mention, I want to say it right up front. We talk about quality of life. We're not talking about economic success. I think Michael mentioned that as well when he spoke about Kerry Packer, didn't he? We're talking about the quality of life we lead to future generations and clean air, clean water, the ability to go into untouched areas, like the Quicksilver example again. That's part of sustainability. We talk about sustainability, I guess, because the Earth is under stress. And James Lovelock, in his most recent book called The Revenge of Gaia, comes straight to the point. He doesn't say, someone else said, Gaia's a tough bitch, and as the Earth is a tough bitch, but we're putting so much pressure on her that our ecosystems are starting to collapse. We're using resources unsustainably, and it's getting to the point where the Earth's not going to take it anymore. And so she starts to fight back. And how does she fight back? Here's an example where she fights back through storm events. And even if you can't see the detail from the back, you'll notice that it peaked in this area. This is between 1990 and about 2000, a bit before. It's a combination of peak storm events and insurance costs of those events over that 8-year period. Storms are getting more frequent, the cost of them is getting greater, the impact upon communities is getting greater. So the melting of ice shelves, dramatic increase of the frequency and the severity of storms. If you don't think Gaia's starting to fight back, if you don't think that we have a problem we need to address sooner rather than later, which will be cheaper, as the Stern report said, if we address climate change now rather than leave it, it's not only an environmental benefit but an economic one. But if you don't think that Gaia's getting cross, I guess you're deluding yourself. The other issue too I want to address is that I'm going to talk about partnerships. A lot of people do, but I think sometimes we misunderstand. We do it ourselves internally. We say, we'll go out and build partnerships with business for sustainability. Yeah, right. Well, what the heck is a partnership? We toss these terms around all the time. And I think often, when we talk about partnerships, we're talking about something that is, a little bit different. I think half the time we're talking about networks, where there's dialogue and there's shared information, but total choice of activity. I would think most of the things I'm going to even demonstrate to you in a moment are probably cooperation. There's informal working together, there's consultation, but it's not binding, and so forth. Probably some coordination because it's got negotiated. I'll show you an example of some negotiated voluntary agreements in a moment. Lots of collaboration, agreed outcomes, shared responsibilities, even shared decision making. But If you get really down to it, partnerships are often quite formal. They're very serious arrangements. I guess a marriage is a partnership, isn't it? In the sense that you give up some autonomy maybe, and you make shared decision making, you share resources and the like. So I'll talk about partnerships, but please be conscious that I'll be talking about things that fit into a range of those areas, and probably, we've only got a handful of partnerships, true partnerships, in the work that we do. We work with dozens of businesses around the issue of sustainability. Sometimes we work with them as regulators. The former EPA is a regulator, and we still do a lot of that regulatory work. It's a form of partnership, certainly moves businesses for a whole range of reasons. But when we go to work with business as a non-regulator, one thing we have to do is to tap into the drivers for business sustainability, and others have mentioned them. Because we really understand, I think, perhaps we've learnt from hard experience, if we don't work with business around the things that engage them, why would they work with government? So if we don't acknowledge, for example, that business has a right to profit and grow, if we don't acknowledge, for example, that business have other priorities beyond sustainability and the environment, business won't work with us. So we need to work with business around that perspective. So what is motivating business? And I won't do the detail here because other speakers have done this so well before me. A lot of people have spoken about it's the right thing to do. Lots of fantastic examples. Businesses do sustainability work in our experience because it does add business value. It's part of their profit and their growth strategies. A lot of businesses also understand risk really well. Environmental management systems, environmental management planning are risk-based systems. So a lot of their drive is around risk, avoiding compliance risk, avoiding reputational risk, overcoming the risks of new entrants and new products that get hold of new green markets before them. So risk is often a very big driver. In fact, Bob Willard, the Canadian writer on sustainability, has a fantastic story. He says, okay, if I said to you, all right, let's get up and move into the next room and I'll finish my presentation there. You'd go, no, don't be ridiculous. No, we're comfortable, we're settled. What do you mean? And if I said to you, all right, look, let's get up and move into the next room. Sitting in that room are piles of money, and on each is your name. No, $200 each. We'll get up and move into the next room. And people go, businesses do all this time, this sort of stuff all the time. You'd go, oh, yeah, all right, $200. Look, I'm comfortable, and by the time I get there, someone's probably got the money anyway. But if I said to you, my God, there's a fire and it started just there and we're all about to die, you'd be out of here in a flash. And that's why risk is often an issue that motivates business beyond all else. Because if you talk about opportunity all the time, this sense of complacency pops in. But there are opportunities. There are opportunities to reduce risk, to make savings through resource efficiencies, to improve reputation, and again, things that people have spoken about this morning, including that fantastic one at the bottom there about improved employee satisfaction, retention and productivity. And some of the figures, the hard information coming out of there is really useful. The hardest one for business to get, of course, is often reputation. Again, this comes from Bob Willard, the Canadian writer, who we had out here just recently. Look, even the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is now saying that about 80% of the value of a business comes from its reputation. And look, Coke's a fantastic example. What does Coke do? They mix a bit of syrup and a bit of water. Their assets are worth next to nothing, really, yet they're incredibly... their market capitalisation is enormous. So as businesses come more to understand that more of their iceberg is that reputation, anything that affects it or improves it or reduces it is going to be good or bad for business, the better I think we start to win these arguments. You could go, for example, and try to speak to the executives of Arthur Andersen about reputation and risk. Well, you'd have a problem, and I suspect by the laughs you understand why, because they were Enron's auditors and they no longer exist. So one nice tangible example of what this can do. That's a pretty good one. We work in partnerships at the New South Wales Department. We're the government side, if you like, of this government-business community partnership, and I'll talk just about government and business in particular. And we work in partnership in probably three main ways. We work in what we call shared partnerships. So that's forming our own relationships, cooperation with local government and with industry associations. Why do we do that? Because there's one of us and there's 400,000 businesses in New South Wales, roughly, give or take a few thousand, I suppose. So that it's only by working with third parties like councils and industry associations that we can ever hope to get information and to get support and to get ideas to small to medium-sized businesses in particular. The second component of our partnership model is around clusters or groups. Businesses gain enormous benefit by talking or working on sustainability together in groups, whether they're the same industry sectors or whether they're diverse groups of companies. So we'll often work with companies where we'll get them together 3 or 4 times a year, maybe 5 or 6 times a year, give them opportunities to share information, to come up with common solutions to problems. And then at the final level, not necessarily a higher or lower level, we will work with individual businesses where we feel that their impact upon sustainability or their ability to influence sustainability is considerable. For example, we have a one-to-one relationship with Insurance Australia Group. One of the reasons is that their 400 smash repairers do 70% of the smash repair work in New South Wales. Now, if we want to change the behaviour of those smash repairers in terms of how they manage their waste and a whole range of stormwater issues, we couldn't possibly get to all those 400 directly, but by working with IAG, we can help them in their education of those very important group of businesses. If we look at some examples of some of this work, nice tangible practical examples I hope, golf course industry is an excellent example. Probably not necessarily a dirty industry, but certainly one that's had a reputation at different times as being a considerable user of resources and using lots of fertilisers, pesticides, and those sorts of things. We've been working with this industry for 4 or 5 years through industry associations like the superintendents and through the Golf Course Presidents Association and the like. What we've learned from programs like this in partnering is that you can't work with business around sustainability by saying, OK, let's work on sustainability. You do a 6 or 9 month project and then you leave. Because all that you do is temporarily build capacity and then you leave a void behind it. So this work was done over 4 or 5 years. It was preceded by a very large prosecution at the Warringah Golf Course, one of the largest prosecutions ever in this state. That certainly galvanised the minds of golf courses, made them one of the most receptive audiences I've ever seen, and you can understand why. Particularly, it was lucky that probably fortunate that one person didn't go to jail as part of that prosecution. So prosecution, education in terms of information, training material. Education's fine, but you can't use it on your own. Direct assessment by working with local government, that is people on the ground looking at what was happening in golf courses. More education work, councils coming in as regulatory officers to check that things were being done. And you can see that between 2004 and 2005, they're the changes that we had in some really basic things like proper storage of chemicals, bundled or unbundled chemicals. Now these are little things, but to have an increase in compliance from 20% to 90-odd%, that change in practice will translate to environmental improvements very, very rapidly. Our individual partnerships are based on the assumption I just mentioned with IAG that we can work with individual companies around sustainability because of their ability to influence sustainability. IAG is a good example. We've worked with them over 3 years. They're called compacts. They're signed at CEO and ministerial level. We'll agree to share projects. We'll support them through knowledge, sometimes some funding, and so on. In a practical sense, we've also done a lot of work with the RTA in Boral. The road that you can see on the bottom, it's basically made from recycled content, one section of that. So it's got glass in there as a sand and cement replacement. It's got asphalt in there that's made with rubber tyres and so on. So just one-to-one relationships to try to develop other results. In terms of clusters, we feel very strongly that while we can work with individual companies or we can work through third parties, that for medium-sized businesses in particular, supporting them through clusters is a very powerful model. Through 2002 and 2005, we worked with 400 companies odd companies around this idea of resource efficiency, using less resources, generating less waste and benefiting from the bottom line. The result, $10 million worth of savings for companies, but also 35,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions. The photo's taken at Hawker de Havilland. The shavings are aluminium shavings. They get huge blocks of aluminium in, they make tiny little components and then ship them off back to America. I'm not sure how sustainable that is. The consequences is 500 tonnes of aluminium swarf a year, and as part of this cluster project, good ideas from others, they're now recycling that aluminium, taking out 200,000 litres of cutting fluid and saving about $1 million. The examples I've given you show a very traditional approach to working, government and business working together. And that traditional partnership of business and government for sustainability has been focused on environmental responsibility, compliance issues, a bit of education for compliance, and on resource efficiency, the Hawker de Havilland example I just gave you of using fewer resources, generating less waste and things like that. But as companies have become more sophisticated in the last year or two, or maybe last 3 or 4 years, many companies have been saying, yeah, we get the compliance stuff. We understand if we use less raw materials and water, we'll save money. But we want to look at sustainability more holistically, not just in these two little slices. How should we go about it? So what we've done in partnership with a lot of these business people is to develop a more holistic approach to working with business on sustainability. So not only do we do the two core areas or work in the two core areas with them, but we're also saying to business, okay, if you want to be sustainable, if you want to move sustainability forward, well, you need to have a vision. You need to have a commitment, probably supported at CEO level, and you need to have strong planning and other systems in there. Trying to overcome that ad hoc approach to sustainability that you often see, or environmental improvement that you often see in businesses. We're also saying to companies, well, there's an opportunity to not only work in those first 3 areas, but let's look at supply chain, both upstream and downstream. Let's look at stakeholder engagement. If you don't engage your staff, saw that this morning, then you're not going to make progress in this area either. And also that idea of being a leader, being an advocate and being a mentor. One of the things that stops, we've found our partnership with companies, one of the things that stops companies moving forward is often this paralysis of, we know sustainability is important, we sort of understand bits and pieces of it all over the place, but how do we draw it together? And if you say to businesses, well, let's start by spending a day and doing a full visioning workshop and really getting down to it and bring all your executives together for a day, they'll often say, you're joking. I can't get my CEO to spend 15 or 20 minutes with me discussing these things. We get around that by doing a 2-hour diagnostic. 2-hour session, 6 or 7 executives from across the organisation for 2 hours will rate their organisation, where they think they are across a range of sustainability issues, and then give themselves a plan to go forward. So this company, for example, identified a range of 5 areas that they could work on. It gives them a plan, a very simple approach with which to go forward. So I guess to sum that up, in building sustainability with business, we've had an approach that's very much said it's not up to government to impose a sustainability agenda upon businesses or other organisations. We, though, have a role to work with you as business to help you accelerate what you want to do by helping you to build knowledge, perhaps by providing funding, but providing support in other ways. And by doing that together, we can move the sustainability debate forward. Thank you. I'll take a question or two if people have questions. Otherwise, quite happy to go to afternoon tea.
Cricket speak?
That is cricket speak. No, I would have said tea, not afternoon tea. Oh, that's fine. Okay. I almost got out of it.
I've got a question Thank you. Gillian Rivers speaking. I've got a question in relation to funding lag and lead agencies, whether they be large companies or small organisations. That type of modelling, while it has its natural logic embedded in that type of practice, it's creating a number of problems. And that is that there are a number of organisations that cannot gain access to funds, have absolutely no idea why they cannot gain access, do not have the resources to gain the education or the staff that have that capacity. Has that issue been discussed at all in government, in that there are a lot of people and organisations locked out, and how to bring a few more on board without breaking the bank where you're concerned?
Look, if I was Margaret Thatcher, I'd say what organisations and when, as she famously did to a journalist, saying it's you're not being that specific there. Look, in terms of funding, there is the best part of $100 million available this year for organisations to access funding to do water and energy work, to do a whole range of other sustainability work. I can't think of organisations who've been locked out, unless, as you suggest, they don't have the capacity to apply for that money because they're not big enough or they don't know it's there. I can't imagine how people would be locked out. So you would need to give me 2 or 3 examples of who's locked out, why they're locked out, and I probably can answer your question. Yeah.
What a great answer. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That was. It's encouraging to see such great work being done in government circles around sustainability and conservation, environment. Thank you very much.